Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hash Rate. My name is Mark Jeffrey. My guest today is Michael White. He is the manager of Bittensor Fund One. Hello, Michael. How you doing?
Hey, Mark. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure to have you here, sir.
Yeah.
Before we get going, so Bittensor Fund One, kind of a crypto hedge fund for Bittensor, DTAO, Alpha, Subnet tokens. What were you doing before this? What kind of led you? Were you a finance guy before? Is this your first fund, or?
I've had arguably too many careers. I graduated college and then started. I spent 5 years on the risk arbitrage trading desk at Citibank in New York, and then I took a 180. I worked as the pastor and executive director on staff at a church in New York City for about 10 years after that, and then in 2022 we moved down to the Dallas area. So me and my wife, we have 4 kids, and that's where we're at now. And then found out about Bittensor in July of 2022.
Oh, wow.
And then it's just been really an awesome journey since. I'll get into it if you want me to, kind of surface level. I follow Matt Hamilton on X, formerly Twitter.
Yeah.
And Matt was former dev relations at Ripple. And then I saw that he moved on to the OpenTensor Foundation, and just knew he was a bright guy who was always kind of value driven, looking at new projects and wanted to be in places where there was good action and activity.
Yeah.
And he had jumped to the OpenTensor Foundation to do DevRel for them. So I saw his post on it, and I was like, man, if he's getting involved in that, I should look this up and see what it's all about. Went to the website, read the white paper, and then been all in ever since. It's the feeling. You see the white paper, and it's just intuitive. It makes sense.
Yeah.
The ecosystem makes sense. The use case makes sense, so that we don't have closed sourced AI with people who may have contradicting objectives to our own.
Yes.
Kind of controlling this man's last invention, this incredible technology. Started buying in July of 2022. Back then, it was trading on Bittensor.exchange. It was trading, OTC on Discord a little while after that, which is just, back in those days, you kind of plugged your nose and sent your funds and then hoped that they would actually get where they were supposed to go and you would actually get something back.
Yeah.
So it was just wild. And then, I had a group of guys who I'm friends with out of New York, from my time there, who basically their stance is, say, I don't know this world. I don't want to know this world, but I know that you know this world. So if I send you some money, will you invest it for me? And then the eventual shape that took was, forming Bittensor Fund One in Texas, and then pooling assets to purchase Bittensor. And now with the rollout in mid-Feb of Dynamic TAO, investing in individual subnets along top of that.
Wow. So have you discussed how much you have under management for the fund?
I don't discuss that publicly.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not against discussing it publicly. I just never have. The reason we structured it this way is the guys on behalf of whom I'm investing. I'm about a third of the fund, and then I'm investing for 4 other individuals total. Most of them are used to private equity style real estate investments.
Yep.
So to me, Bittensor works perfectly for that. At a high level, I consider my role in this ecosystem to be, just recruiting capital that might not otherwise be here, because that obviously benefits the ecosystem. It gives teams who are working on subnets, who are working on the technology, more runway by having additional investors, and also, we're all here because we want the number to go up, right? So it certainly helps in that regard. But at the same time, it can be a very, very difficult technology, very difficult ecosystem for people to understand.
It is definitely very difficult to sort of wrap head around, as you know.
Yeah.
And I've had difficulty understanding it. And I come out of crypto, and I have a technology, I have a engineering background. So just sort of figuring out how everything is working and how it all fits together. It took me a while. It wasn't a simple thing, right?
So, and it's. I mean, we know this from Dynamic TAO, right? It's constantly evolving. The OpenTensor Foundation team is constantly working on new stuff. Now there are all these 78 now subnets that are working on really, really cool stuff. I I just met with another guy who has a team who wants to launch a subnet. So we were talking about that, and how he's going to get to a point of generating revenue and how it's going to benefit the ecosystem and all that. But really, these guys that I'm working with here are, historically real estate investors. So they wanted something that had a yield. They wanted something that had principal protection. So we worked with Uphold. Shout out to Matt Murray, but we worked with Uphold to kind of have a structure where I can pool the assets on chain, and then on a monthly basis, you monetize some of the staking yield. That's what we were doing up until mid-February when Dynamic TAO launched. And then at this point, the pitch I made to everybody involved in the fund was basically, it's going to be a lot more beneficial for us long term if we stop monetizing the monthly yield. Just number one, because of where TAO is trading, but number two, especially because of the rollout of the Dynamic TAO ecosystem and all the tradable alpha tokens. So let's just stop doing the monthly distributions, and I'm gonna take that. And the original goal was just to take what would have been the monthly distributions, so your 15% APY at the time, and put them into alpha tokens. And then when I started talking to some of the teams about what they were building, I got pretty excited about it. A few of them in particular. And at this point, we're up to we've deployed about 30% of our TAO holdings into individual alpha tokens at this point.
That's what I've done too. I'm a third in. So yeah, I'm definitely, So okay, we're thinking very similarly. I'm glad to hear that actually.
Yeah. And it's been, I was very public about this, out of the gate. I think you and I have kind of very similar thought process and kind of genesis when it comes to this. Out of the gate, everybody was saying, wait 1 to 2 months. Don't even touch the ecosystem. So, I
by everybody, we're talking about sort of TAO OGs. So
I'm talking about TAO OGs. And everybody, specifically, if you're in Discord on the RAW channel, there's a lot of good alpha that gets dropped there. And that was really, especially from really the big brain ecosystem players, that was the kind of common denominator is, unless you really, really know what you're doing and have an axe to grind, kind of stay out of the subnet tokens for, I think initially people were saying 1 to 2 weeks, and then that turned into 1 to 2 months. And then it turns, I don't really know. But, at this point, I think, and obviously, your disclaimers, this is not investment advice. But I think now is a great time, especially for people who haven't started already, to start deploying. I went in big on Taoshi on Subnet 8 just out of the gate because I like their team. I like what they're doing. The path to revenue is very clear to me. And some of the feedback I've gotten on X is I'll post, hey, here are 5 great subnets, and then I'll get a million comments and DMs from people. Well, what about this one? What about, just because I'm not invested doesn't mean it's not a great subnet. But I think what people are realizing is there has to be a great team. There has to be a path to revenue. And Subnet 8 was one of those teams. There are several now that we're invested in, but one of those teams out of the gates where, all the things I'm looking for are very clear to me. And the reality is, who knows how many hundreds of subnets we're going to have by the end of this year. And then eventually that's going to become thousands. It's going to be impossible to keep up with the growth of the network unless you're really tracking it full time and quite frankly have a team to do it. So I'm excited to see where this leads. I think there's a very viable career path for a lot of people out of this. I think it's just, it is arguably the most important technology, and this, the mission behind this is decentralizing artificial intelligence. Obviously, that's why we're all here. So for me, someone who's mission driven, value driven, there's truly no better place to be.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I feel very much the same way. I've got other bets, but this is the one I'm sort of mentally focused on the most because it's the most interesting. I think it has the biggest potential. We're either very, very right, and this is very, very big, or we're very, very wrong. It's like sort of one or the other, right? And and the more I watch it, the more I'm convinced that we're very, very right. It tracks with things I've seen in the past, like the Ethereum early days. If you've watched the show, you probably know I was in the Ethereum ICO, and then DeFi Summer which followed that, and this feels like that, but it might even be bigger. This is kind of my gut. on it.
I think so. Yeah, I think
Let's talk.
so.
Let's talk for a second. I actually want to drill down on something that you brought up.
Sure.
Is now the time, right? So, and so my thesis is that after listening to everyone and sort of listening to, there's a lot of negative voices kind of saying stay out from very smart people, right? So it's sort of you don't want to totally ignore that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, what I see is market caps of subnets are extremely low right now.
Yeah.
Right. So they start off kind of 100K to 200K and scale up. So I guess this morning I saw one that was pretty close to 20 million.
Yeah.
But historically, the last couple of weeks, it's been like sort of 14 million or so.
Yeah.
So, they're starting to creep up a little bit. But compared to what you can angel invest in on angel lists, those valuations start like 30, 40 million, right? To sort of, at the angel or seed round, right?
Yeah.
So we're below that. And I think we're in a little moment where these valuations are so magically low. We'll be like, oh my God, why wasn't everyone buying, right?
Right.
But I've seen this before. And the last time I saw it was CoinMarketCap in like 2013 when, go back and look at that, what the price of Bitcoin was $100.
Right.
Ethereum was like $2, right? It's like a magical time you can never return to. And I feel like we're seeing that right now in Bittensor. And, conversely, yes, there's a lot of emissions being produced by the chain. According to my calculations, it's 2.5% per day that's being emitted in terms of subnet tokens and TAO into the pools. Mm-hmm. So we're all suffering 2.5% dilution daily.
Yeah.
So what that would mean is that that each subnet has to grow 75% in terms of their market cap in order just to remain even, right? To keep the same valuation. But it's so low, it feels like 75% is tiny, right? So are those numbers right do you see the same thing I do? And how do you think about that?
I do. And that's been the main argument is everybody talking about emissions and talking about dilution. And that makes sense. What I think is going to fundamentally change is you're going, so right now, by and large, the only people buying subnet tokens are people who were already involved in the ecosystem before dynamic TAO rolled out. So mathematically, the argument is, the sum of subnet prices will eventually, and this is, 5-10 years down the road, will eventually equalize around, 1.0. The reality is, and I understand the emissions argument and just the sheer volume of emissions coming into each of the subnet pools every single day. And I think that's important. I think that should not be discounted. And I think the way you go about investing in subnet tokens is arguably more important than the timing. So the most intelligent approach to me, kind of the risk-free approach is you take whatever you stake to root, whatever your core holdings are, you make a decision. Everybody has their own personal risk tolerance. You say, I'm willing to risk 10% of my TAO, or I'm willing to risk 0% of my TAO. And you're in my case, I'm willing to risk 30% of my TAO. You make that designation, then you do it. And then going forward, let's say your risk tolerance is 0 and capital preservation is my number one goal. And I don't want to risk any of my TAO. So I'm going to stake 100% to root. Even at that level of involvement, you still have emissions coming out every single day that I think then should be invested in the individual alpha tokens. And, to me, I've posted about this, but to me, that's really more of a mission-driven approach, because in order for Bittensor to be what it is supposed to be, you have to have subnet investment. And,
yes.
You and I have both seen them. There are a lot of voices who will remind everybody, emissions are up here and they're going to come down, and, don't scale in yet. But the reality is, if you have a project that you're excited about and that you really want to support, I think at a certain point you have to start dipping at least your toes in, if not, jumping in at least to the shallow end. Because it benefits massively those individual subnets, obviously, to have people buying their token, because then they're going to receive a greater share of emissions, which gives them greater runway to go out and hire people to do marketing, to do Bitmine Subnet 34 is doing public appearances on cable shows.
Are they?
Subnet
I didn't know that. Where
yeah,
they?
it's awesome. It's like local news channels, and they have their local anchor up there, and they're saying, tell us why this technology is so important. And as someone who's been involved in this ecosystem for a while, the fact that we're actually at that point is really, really amazing. It's incredible, and that's the result of a lot of efforts of a lot of different people to get the word out there over time. And it's a result at this point of subnets really taking themselves seriously as a proper business. So having the stance, I'm not just going to, set up kind of an emissions protocol so that I can have a certain number of TAO coming to me every month. I'm going to run this thing as a business. And I recognize that, I need to get to a point where the use case makes sense and I'm generating revenue, and people who aren't currently involved in the Bittensor ecosystem actually have a desire to come in and to buy my token, regardless of what they think about Bittensor in general. So that's kind of comment number one. Comment number two, and you and I were both, I think, realizing what TAObot was up to at the same time. I forget if that was Sunday night or Monday night.
I want to talk about that, but yes, go ahead.
Yeah. And so leaving, they're one example, and I think their solution. It's interesting. I think it's a good first step.
Yeah, that's my reaction as well.
Yeah, and it's
And let's talk about what that is, because some people don't know. So just briefly, what is TAObot?
Yeah, so TAObot, I don't know the team. I don't know anything about them. What I do know is they've devised a solution where essentially if you hold Ethereum, you can come in and it seems to me that's basically.
Well, let's describe the problem first of all, right? So you and I are neck deep in TAOstats.io, which is the main site that everybody uses to exchange their TAO for subnet tokens and stake them and back again. Yes. But that thing looks like a space shuttle cockpit, right? Just straight up, it does. It's really hard to understand what's going on, right?
Yes.
Unless you're sort of neck deep like you and I are.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's like Uniswap for subnet tokens, right? For the normies.
To get the bar right when you're switching from one allocation to anyway, on TAOstats, it's like it.
Yeah, you got to pick your validator. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. So, anyway, so along comes TAObot, and they say, wouldn't it be great if people who just have Ethereum and could just participate in this world without using a Uniswap like thing, right? Yes. So go ahead.
Yes, and so number one, I think that's very necessary. Number two, you can essentially commit Ethereum to the protocol, and then they just do all the back end work for you. So full disclosure, I think the beta actually starts, or I guess the full rollout starts today. The beta's already happened. I haven't used it yet, but the principle is that if I'm an Ethereum holder, I know nothing about TAOstats, I know nothing about the Bittensor ecosystem. I've never bought an alpha token before. I don't even know what an alpha token is. They have a user interface where I can come in and I'm contributing X dollar amount of Ethereum, and I want that allocated in the following way among individual subnets. And they handle the back end for you completely. And then, from my understanding, I'm assuming it's with an exchange or some other type of back end orchestrator where everything's pooled, but they just keep track of the accounting for you.
So it's a centralized exchange. It's like Coinbase or Binance.
Right.
Yeah. So they manage, so you don't have direct control over your TAO wallet and your subnet tokens. It's up on the exchange.
Correct. Which obviously for the not your keys, not your coin crew, that's going to create some problems, which are certainly worth considering. But the point, and my understanding, I think in their reply to you, they said they were going to work on a trustless solution, which should be rolled out in the next couple of weeks, which is very important.
Now, so I'm a little bit concerned. I just want to put a little disclaimer in here. So I like this too. Like my heart is like, yes, this is the right answer. It's dumbing it down. It's providing a consumer simple user interface, however, we don't know who these people are. With Coinbase, I know who runs it, right? I know who backed it. Andreessen Horowitz backed it. Yeah. Binance, we know CZ. Like, it's been around long enough that we know it's not Mt. Gox, right? It's not going to just take our coins and run. Yeah. These guys just might take our coins and run. We don't know. Yeah, that is a danger.
You don't know. That is a danger. I think the trustless solution will ultimately have a lot more traction for that very reason, which again is a very valid reason. What's especially exciting to me, so Void AI is also working on a solution. At this point, they have a trustless bridge that will bridge on Solana, will bridge wrap TAO to TAO and vice versa.
Okay. What about subnet tokens?
Yes. So Subnet tokens, according to them, are coming in version 2.
Okay.
And that, to me, that's when it gets really exciting. And that's when kind of these early adopters, these people like you and like me who said, listen, I get the math, but I also understand that there's some asymmetric opportunities here that I may not get a chance to be a part of again. When Solana came out, when Ethereum came out, you were around. There are a lot of people who mathematically saying this valuation doesn't make sense.
Yes.
And the people who did the best were the people who kind of just plugged their nose. And I understand that argument, but here's 3 reasons why it could just 1,000x and make it completely worth your while. And that's very exciting to me. And here's exactly what I think is going to happen. I think you will start to see wrapped subnet tokens trading on Solana. You'll start to see them trading on Ethereum. And then when those people, just picture this with me. Let's say Subnet 4, not so that I'm not just harping on Subnet 8. Let's say Subnet 4 all of a sudden has a wrapped Ethereum token that starts trading. And then the moment, so it's a true wrap. It's not just kind of the omnibus solution that Talbot has brought to market. It's a true wrap. And then the moment it starts trading, now all of a sudden you have all these, the meme coin traders on Solana who see it trading and, oh my gosh, it's up, 50% in the last 30 minutes. So now I'm going to pile in. And then if it's a true bridge, if it can be arbitraged, meaning you can freely exchange from the wrap version back into the real version that's denominated on the TAO blockchain, you will see some of these valuations of subnets absolutely skyrocket. And to me, at least for the launch phase, and the launch phase, by the way, let me just finish that thought and then I'll come back to it.
Yes.
For the launch phase, that means that we could potentially be looking at some of subnet prices trading between 10 all the way up to 100. That could become irrelevant for a period of time before people, the meme coin traders by and large don't care what they're investing in. They just know what they like to see in terms of momentum. So we could have this period where some of these subnet tokens, these alpha tokens that are wrapped, because it's arbitrageable, can trade up to these sky high valuations that we know as ecosystem participants don't make sense, but nobody in the Solana world cares.
They don't.
And if you're one of those people who has invested heavily in a subnet that will benefit from that, then all of a sudden you're in a situation where you can take advantage of that and you can start trading out of those subnet tokens. You can trade back into them. There may be for a time a significant arbitrage opportunity where there's a disparity where, on the TAO one, it's trading at 10 cents, but on Ethereum, it's trading at 50 cents. So I'm going to buy a bunch here and then sell a bunch there, and just wait for it to get those are all valid strategies. And that's what I don't think people are putting enough stock in, is the reality that once those players show up to the ecosystem, right? If you see something on Solana that's up 50% and it's got you mentioned the market caps earlier. It's got a $200,000 market cap. Like that's drool material for these Solana traders. Even up 2 million market cap is drool material. And for everybody in the TAO world, it's like, man, that's a really high, because everybody's looking at the FDV. That's a really high valuation. Are you sure this is, in X number of years when 21 million tokens are issued, are you sure this thing's going to be worth $10 billion? Like, no, I'm not, but I'm sure that, 1,000 Solana traders are going to want this thing in the next 30 minutes.
Yes.
Because of how new it is and how low the market cap is.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you about where do you think the new money's coming from? But I think you just answered it, right? Because right now there's kind of no new money flowing into the subnet world, right? It's just you, me, and all our friends trading subnet tokens against each other, right? But there's nobody sort of buying new TAO and pouring it into the ecosystem. Although I have noticed that the amount of TAO has remained that's staked in Root has remained steady at 6.05 million TAO for weeks, right?
Yep.
I think it's like 2 weeks now. And so none of that is so that's not depleting, yet we've been emitting new TAO. So all the new emitted TAO is being poured into subnet tokens. So I have seen that. That's very interesting. Yeah,
there are three main places I think demand for alpha tokens will come from in the next month in particular. Number one is CZ, right? You had Binance, CZ's family office announced, I think it was almost 2 weeks ago now that they were backing one of the subnets, and that's obviously phenomenal development for the ecosystem. So they're going to be coming in and buying subnet tokens, and I think it's very clear at this point. Even watching the bots today, there were a couple just outlandishly large market buys of subnet tokens. I think somebody came in and bought like 2,000 TAO worth of shoots. And it was right after somebody posted, in order for shoots to reclaim its all-time high value, you need 10,000 TAO invested in them. Literally like an hour later, somebody just blasts 2,000 TAO, and it takes the market up it's ridiculous. But what that tells me is that's somebody who just doesn't care.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like that's somebody who's coming in.
They don't care about the market cap. That's what.
Yeah, I don't care about market cap. I don't care what the impact is of my purchase. I know this thing is going to be worth whatever their model says it's worth in 5 years from now, and I just want to be in at these prices. I don't care what I pay. So that's crowd number one is people who know little, who aren't already in the ecosystem, but now who come in. They see a subnet, they know a team, they know that there's a product rolling out on the subnet, whatever the case may be, and they want to be invested. Source number two is what we talked about from the Solana crowd. So those are short-term traders. And again, my thesis there is as soon as wrapped token, true wraps start trading, I think that crowd will be committing money very, fast and furious.
Yeah.
And it's, maybe none of it will be lasting, but the people who are going to benefit are people who are already invested, because you're just going to see, once the wraps start trading, you're going to see these tokens trade up 100%, 200%. For seemingly no reason. You're gonna scan the Twitter posts of the founders and the team members. There's going to be no update whatsoever, but it's just because you get these wrap tokens going across the leaderboard of everybody who's watching Solana, Ethereum, those change. So I think that's source number two, and then source number three is you have everybody who's just still staked to root. They haven't delegated to any subnets. And over time, the way that the mechanism is designed, your yield for being staked to root intentionally by design decreases as an incentive mechanism for you to be involved in specific subnets.
So that 92% that's currently staked in root will start freeing up and flowing over into subnets. So that's one other source of it. That's what you're saying.
I think it has to. The other thing that I would say is, I've had conversations with several exchanges, several aggregators, and I'm not going to name names, but I've essentially made the pitch to several large retail exchanges that you need to enable staking on your platform, and it's real. The fact that no exchange is doing this yet is really silly to me, because you can just click a button, click and stake on your Bittensor, and it would be super easy for them to enable a backend where they use someone who's already validating just to stake to root. And now it's a differentiator between you and the however many other exchanges that allow people to hold Bittensor, where if I buy on Uphold instead of Kraken, I know that I'm going to be able to stake, and the yield's going to go down over time, but I'll take it while I can get it.
So I agree. Let me just interject for a second, because I think it's an incredibly important point. And a lot of people don't know the story. How did Binance become Binance, right? How did they become, the monster exchange of all exchanges? The way they did it, and this is coming from CZ. I saw him live in Singapore about 5 years ago. I was sitting in the front row. CZ tells this story when the blockchain Neo first came out. I don't know if you know anything about that, but Neo separated out the gas token from the Neo staking token. Okay. And so if you held Neo in your wallet, you accrued gas with every block. So you were just earning, right? And if you had your Neo up on an exchange, you didn't get the gas. The exchange got the gas, except for Binance. Binance enabled gas collection and kept track of it for everyone, so everybody could get their gas. And that was enough to incentivize all these new users to come over to Binance instead of anywhere else, because Neo was like a hot coin for 6 months or so. It's not today, but it was then. And that basically was the explosion of audience that made Binance the powerhouse it is today. That was the moment. This is a similar moment. I agree.
I think it is. I didn't know that story. I think it is a similar moment. And so what I've talked about with these exchanges is, I've connected them with several validators at this point, and said, you guys just need to work together. And the validators are already managing stake. You guys just need someone to enable the back end. You set up a super simple user interface where you click the stake, and then now I'm staked to root. And here's your estimate, with the little, the asterisk that says non-binding, whatever. Here's your estimate of your staking yield, and anything, then everybody gets a spread. It works for the exchange because they get the traction. It works for the validator because now they get a spread on presumably a sizable stake with most of these exchanges. I was just going through the top 50 wallets earlier. So, cracking 50,000 plus TAO, like a sizable stake for some of these validators is going to make a huge difference. All of a sudden they're getting a spread just for receiving a stake from an exchange. So zero additional work. And then the kind of the tack on conversation that we're having now with some of these exchanges is what managed investment options should we make available for people who keep their balance on our platform or on our exchange. So do we want kind of three different manage options where there's high risk, there's low risk. If you ever worked at a big company and you have your 401k, they give you these kind of tiered options. That's I'm retiring in 2050, I'm retiring in 2040, I'm retiring, and they're vastly oversimplified. But the point is, I have a risk tolerance that adjusts based on when I want my money back, and it's a no-brainer for me for some of these exchanges to start offering that. You could have an inference only election where I only want to I only want to delegate to subnets that are doing inference, or I only want to delegate to subnets with a certain maturity level, however you define that, whether that's market cap or whether that's revenue generation, whatever the case may be. But once those products rather start coming about, I think just the floodgates are going to be open. You look at DCG and Grayscale, like they already have a Bittensor fund. Yuma obviously investing they're an awesome team. Yep. But there's no reason why Digital Currency Group, as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason why Digital Currency Group, whether Yuma or another division of DCG manages it, doesn't really matter. Why they won't come out with kind of managed options to give people exposure to specific subnets over time. Because it's a no-brainer for them. There's so much, it's going to sound silly, but there's so little transparency as to what happens between, I'm an investor. Let's just use Grayscale as an example. I give you X amount of capital today. You're telling me, I'm going to get approximately XYZ yield, but you're not going to return my capital to me for another 2 years. So there's just so much that can happen in between there where, DCG takes a fee. Now the validator gets a fee. All these players in the ecosystem all of a sudden are well populated, well rewarded, because you have all this outside capital that's coming in looking for a home. So I fully believe that's going to happen. And it's, I think it's going to happen more quickly than most people anticipate.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's sort of what my gut says too. I feel like everything in my stomach is saying we're in a magical little time right now, but it's not going to last forever. And in fact, it's probably only going to last like another month or two, maybe 3 months at the most. Yeah. And then it's just going to be like, then it'll be like another epoch. And you'll be like, oh, if I could only go back to February or March, oh my God, prices then were amazing. Right? Yeah. Like that, everything in me is just screaming that. So
I agree. I think, I don't have a crystal ball, right? I was having a conversation with one of my friends who was asking me if he should throw some more money at TAO a couple of days ago. And, his exact situation is he needs the money back in about 18 months. And he said, what do you think TAO is gonna do in that time frame? My response was, man, I don't know. What do I hope it's gonna do? I hope we all have Lambos and private jets like everybody else, right? But what's it gonna do in 18 months? I don't know. I can tell you confidently what it's gonna do over the next 10 years. Yeah. But my guess on timing is that you're probably going to have kind of another month, maybe maximum, of gradual price accretion in a lot of the high quality subnets. And then I think you're from those three sources that we talked about, the VC crowd, the Solana crowd, the trading crowd, as well as people who are already in the ecosystem who need to redeploy to individual subnet tokens to capture the yield they want to generate, I think you're going to see an explosion in value. I would not be surprised to see the sum of subnet prices at 10, 15. Just everybody's going to be out there saying this is totally illogical. But that's the way, that's
the way markets work.
That's the way markets work. Markets can remain irrational for so much longer than you think they can.
Yes.
And
in both directions.
In both directions. And which, looking at Bittensor's price, we obviously see that to the downside too, for the ecosystem as a whole. But my guess is, over the next month, maybe two, gradual price accretion as people see the value here. And then I think some of these subnets and my strategy is to look, I'm trying to tier my risk appropriately. So the vast majority of what I've deployed, that 30% that's in alpha tokens now, is with the higher quality subnets, like that top 10 page in terms of price and emissions ranking. And then I have some smaller bets. I like what Omega Labs is up to, subnets 21 and 24. You and I are both in Cato, 55. There are a lot of awesome teams doing really, really cool stuff and working on viable use cases that will be revenue generating. And I think some of those you're going to see them multiply by 10, probably overnight. Some of the larger ones, I think, you may see them double, you may see them triple, but over the next 1 to 2 years, you probably see them multiply by 10 to 20. And again, I know on the surface, none of that math makes sense, but quite frankly, I don't think that it matters when you get those three sources of capital all coming in.
It doesn't.
Simultaneously.
So like I said, I was in the Ethereum ICO, so I watched it go from like 50 cents to, all the way up to 4,500 right at its peak. And the bulk of sort of that price rise was specifically due to the ICO craze, right? Yep. Because you needed ETH to buy the ICOs. And everyone was trying to replicate what happened with ETH, right? Or with Bitcoin, and they saw the ICOs as their shot, right? So after that was over, the price of Ethereum still remained relatively high. So it did it was sticky. It did stick, right? And Ethereum's dominance versus the other chains in terms of TVL is and in terms of price is still incredibly high. Yes. And it had sort of a second bump with the DeFi summer. Right, when decentralized finance popped in, again, you needed Ethereum to power investments in DeFi, right? So now we're seeing that same dynamic in TAO. You need TAO to invest in DTAO. There's no other way to invest. You need the TAO, right? So you can't buy it with Ethereum. You can use your Ethereum to buy TAO to buy subnet tokens, but you have to go through. You have to actually have raw TAO. There is no other way to buy subnets.
And ultimately, the wrap token trading, all of that is just capital attraction to me. I don't really care long term if any of those people, keep their wrap tokens, because the reality is, to your point, it gets eyes on the ecosystem, and then people see it's free marketing. People start to see what this network is really capable of. They see the potential. As far as I'm concerned, this Bittensor as a network has infinite potential use cases, and that's. Quite frankly, I don't think that's something that the crypto world has ever seen before.
Yeah, let's talk about the use cases for a second, because I was curious as to your view of this, and I do think about this a lot, and specifically the AI that's being produced and the products that are being produced by the Bittensor universe versus what's coming out of the venture capital backed AI companies, and the very large purveyors of AI like OpenAI, Grok. There's some people I talk about TAO with, and they're kind of like, that's kind of stupid, because isn't Elon and Grok just going to do all that? Isn't Grok going to be able to do everything that Bittensor is going to do with crypto? So who gives a fuck? Like, it's not really. You're telling me it's the Linux version, but it's not really. Elon's already got the Linux version with Grok, right? So, in your mind, why do you think that that's not true? That actually some unique value is being produced in the Bittensor universe?
Yeah, the short answer is I just don't think any of these kind of centralized solutions are sustainable from an economic standpoint. I don't think they're going to be economically viable. I am not I am not a big fan of OpenAI. I'm not a big fan of Sam Altman.
Yeah.
I don't know what your stance is there, but from
Nobody.
my
I'm right where you are. Go ahead.
yeah, from my vantage point, okay, here's a guy who started a nonprofit and then spun a capped for profit out of a nonprofit. As someone who's so that he could retain Microsoft as a large investor and increase the value, and then who sits before Congress and says, everybody's seen that clip. I do this for fun. I don't get a salary.
Yeah.
and then you see that his stake in OpenAI is potentially now worth $7 billion because oops, I went back on that word and actually now sorry guys, I am going to take a stake and it happens to be worth $7 billion. Like that's to me that's literally criminal. That's nothing short of criminal. It's a mockery of nonprofit laws. So I'm just just in terms of my philosophy of life. I think that anything that's built on a non-solid foundation eventually crumbles, and I feel like OpenAI matches that definition. And then I think everybody read all the DeepSeek news when it came out 6 weeks ago, however long ago that was. If you have and I think Manus is the new one now who's specifically designing AI agents, and they've committed to open sourcing their code within the first 12 months. If you have these large advanced models coming out of China, which is ironic, right? Because China is communist and we're capitalist, yet China now is the country that is sharing all this technology openly. And that's not a political statement. That's not none of that.
No, it's just a fact. You're absolutely right. China's kicking our ass in some key ways.
It's reality. So how do you now, as Sam Altman, have conversations with SoftBank and your other big investors? Microsoft's already kind of backpedaling from their commitment to OpenAI. Figure Robotics has done the same thing. They were in bed with OpenAI out of the gates, but now they're using open source models.
I'm an investor in Figure, so I follow every molecule of everything they do.
Good for you, man. I think what Brett's doing, what their team is doing is substantial. It's mind blowing to me. And I just don't know where the stamina comes from. It's like every I know the guy's got young kids too, and he's posting like every single day about all this stuff that's happening and how do you guys do it? And good team, I guess. But the point is, you cannot justify to investors for another fundraising round unless they don't know this world at all. In which case it's dumb capital. I think the window to attract smart capital to closed source AI solutions is closing, if not completely closed. And then the question becomes, if I'm an investor, what is the most logical destination for my capital? And to me, I'm obviously biased, as are you, but it has to be Bittensor, because now, you're telling me there's this beautiful decentralized solution that rewards the work of contributors all over the globe, and it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, you can contribute, where there's no censorship, there's no for better or worse, there's no gatekeeper to everything that's happening on the network. To me, that becomes infinitely more attractive and valuable.
Yeah, I feel like, in my mind, it's sort of and I've said this before on the show, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it's the operating system wars all over again, where all these big companies poured billions of dollars into competing operating systems. Everybody thought one of those was going to win. One was open source Linux. Why? For the same reasons that were, same dynamics that you just described. And and also we see that movie over and over again. PCs versus the mainframes. The open internet versus AOL. Right. And now, warfare, where you have drones versus, old school fighter jets and, aircraft carriers. Right. You want 1 million drones that like nobody can defend against. Right. Like that's far more powerful. Yes. And I feel like each of these subnets is a drone. Right. Yeah. and also on top of that, each of these subnets is the best in the world at what they do, potentially, because each subnet actually is itself a bunch of subnets or a bunch of competing solutions, hundreds of them, maybe thousands of them, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I talk pretty regularly with, just to use Subnet 8 as an example, I talk pretty regularly with their team, and they are, if you knew the level of talent they were onboarding, and I'm not only talking about employees, I'm talking about teams of engineers that they are onboarding to be part of their ecosystem. If you knew the level of talent that they were now in contact with and onboarding to the network, like you would go crazy. You'd be 100% behind it. And to me, the smart subnet owners are doing exactly that. They're going after people who aren't currently part of the crypto ecosystem, but to that crowd, this incentive mechanism makes perfect sense because you're speaking to a demographic. Let's say you have a team of extremely talented engineers. You're speaking to a demographic that wants geographic freedom, live wherever you want as long as there's internet connection. They want employment freedom. They want to be able to take the time off that they need when they want, work your own hours, et cetera. You can do all of that with extremely limited to no overhead as a participant on the Bittensor network. It's obviously very dependent on what subnets you mine on. But if you want to figure it out for someone who's a talented engineer, you certainly can. I think, with Subnet 8, I've they're working on it, but I posed the question, why are you guys not in front of every single undergraduate machine learning program right now? And, why aren't you doing partnerships with Kaggle? And I think they've had those conversations. Let's do partnerships with all these kind of aggregators who are bringing machine learning talent together to onboard all these people to Bittensor. Because if you're competing on Kaggle, maybe I'm dating myself with Kaggle, but
what is Kaggle? Redefine that for people who don't.
Yeah. So Kaggle is a website, a community where real companies, real organizations will post what it was essentially a bounty. They'll have a competition and they'll say, we're looking for a model that achieves, here are objectives, and it's open to, thousands of participants all over the world. All you have to have is internet connection, some expertise. And then if your submission is the best submission, then you get the cash prize. And to me, they've demonstrated the market size for machine learning talent. And now the challenge for us is, okay, the path, if I'm a young engineer coming out of school or part of an undergraduate program, part of a graduate program, and you tell me I can contribute to the Bittensor network and I can actually be rewarded real time for my efforts, all of a sudden that becomes a viable career path for me. So we need to, at the network level, ultimately get in front of as many of these, the top 50, top 100 computer science programs in the country and say, this is what we're doing, encourage professors to build, capstone projects around it. And then, by the way, your students can actually receive monetary reward for the work that they're contributing in addition to whatever mark or grade that they're earning. So what, we're just on the precipice of all that talent coming onto the network. Right now, it's just kind of people who've been part of crypto for enough years who have the right skill set, have kind of migrated the Bittensor network. But there hasn't really, been what I think will be a huge exodus of talent from the closed source AI community to the open source AI community, and the logical place to be for that entire community is the Bittensor network.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's go back to the Solana, sort of rush of capital. You spoke about bridges. How close do you think that is? I think you said like 1 to 2 months away.
I don't know. I think so. I think TAO said that they would have a trustless solution, kind of that omnibus solution, where you can convert your Ethereum to their platform. I think that was.
Yeah, they said soon.
Soon.
Oh, they did. They did say a couple of weeks. That's true. And then the other one I've been tracking is Hotkey. Have you been watching Hotkey?
No. I've heard of Hotkey. I haven't watched it closely, honestly.
Yeah, I have. I've done a sort of a cursory dive on it. They appear to have some bridges sort of in the works.
Yeah.
But they're also what they seem to be focused on is the EVM inside of Bittensor itself, right?
Yeah.
Which so if you have your TAO kind of on the main TAO chain, the main Bittensor chain, you have to actually sort of bridge it into the EVM layer of the TAO chain.
Yeah.
And so they basically have a utility for that. And then once you're sort of in the EVM world, they then have a Uniswap-like interface where you can go and do subnet trading. And it does look like Uniswap, right? So it doesn't look like the space shuttle cockpit that we're used to dealing with over at TAO Stats, right? And that's no dig on those guys. They had to make it that way.
Yep.
It just, it is what it is. And it's amazing that it works as well as it does on day one. Like there's been no major problems, which that is amazing.
Incredible.
So, but it's, for the normies, they kind of need the, they kind of need the whole Uniswappy looking thing, right? So, so I like what these guys have done, but I haven't dug in hard to it yet. So
yeah, I haven't yet either. The one I saw yesterday was Void AI. They had the bridge from Wrap TAO to on the Solana chain to regular TAO. And the comment from them was version 2 will have wrapped subnet tokens. So I have no idea what that timeline looks like, but most of these teams move extremely quickly in this ecosystem, as you well know.
I agree.
So I can't imagine it's going to be more than 2 to 4 weeks before we start seeing legitimate wrap token solutions come to market.
That's pretty soon.
Which is very which would seem to suggest kind of the confluence of those 3 capital sources we talked about, which would seem to suggest that we're kind of leaving this accumulation zone, if we want to call it that, where prices are cheap because nobody's really buying, and now there's going to be a lot of I think definitely within the next 1 to 2 months, we'll probably kind of leave this accumulation zone with all the new capital coming in.
Are you looking at SwordScan at all? Is that like a tool you use?
Yeah, I like SwordScan. I think it's very valuable. I think the Mindshare tool. Unusual Whales has kind of a tool like that for the stock market, and I think the Mindshare tool is really good. It's really important.
I agree.
Yeah, I had a kind of a brief back and forth with the designer, with the guy who built it, and I think a lot of people were asking him, what is the math behind the Mindshare? My comment to him was, you don't. As far as I'm concerned, you don't owe it to anybody to demonstrate the math, but what would be wise for you to do is to demonstrate a correlation between Mindshare and price action. Yes. Because if you demonstrate that correlation, then people know it's a reliable tool that's going to be useful for their objectives. They don't have to know the math. They don't care about the math. And really ultimately that's what I think we're all in the business of doing is we take these solutions or these tools that are extremely difficult to wrap your head around, and we try to make them as digestible as possible for people who are not from the crypto community. I think he's done a great job of that with SwordScan.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and it reminds me very much of Cookie. You know what I'm talking about with that. So
I saw your post. Yeah.
So I like Cookie. I mean, I think it's great. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not sure which. The sort of meme coins with Mal's AI tokens on Solana, that whole world collapsed.
Yes.
And Cookie was kind of, SwordScan, but for that.
Yep.
But it was a very good way to sort of track what was going on in that universe. So I feel like, especially when the Subnet token universe heats up extraordinarily, and there are thousands of subnets, that is going to be an increasingly valuable tool to figure out which ones are rising and which ones are falling. You're just not going to be able to keep track of everything otherwise, right? So
I
think going to need summarizers.
Any tool like that kind of aggregates social media activity, because if you're doing this the wrong way, you're basically waiting to see what comes across your feed, and then you're investing based on what's popular in that sense. But the reality is, if it hits your feed, you're probably already too late. Whereas these tools that help you to kind of detect that activity early on, I think you have a shot at making some good multiplication happen. Ultimately my goal in Subnets is to multiply my TAO holdings on behalf of the fund that I manage. I think that should be everybody's goals. And that could look a million different ways. That could be you, I know some of these haven't gone well, but that could be you just, kind of hitting singles and doubles with new subnets that come out, just kind of, I'm going to put a little, and that's, I would stress, don't do more than a little, a little capital into some of these to see if they're going to do a 5 or 10x when people really catch on and see who's managing them. But I'm excited to see people, getting into the alpha token ecosystem, because I think it's important. I think it drives the value for the ecosystem as a whole, which is what we're all here for.
Yeah, completely agree. But I think that's a pretty good spot to end this one on. Is there anything that you want to plug before we go?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, because I've been watching you on X, and your insights have been invaluable. And I've got my little the little notification, the little bell is on for you. And every time you post something, I'm like, oh, what is he saying? Is it something new I don't know? And a lot of times it is something new I don't know. So it's been very valuable.
I appreciate that. I'm usually not a very public person, but when Subnets rolled out and I saw kind of the dominant thinking, I said, you know what, I'm going to be that guy who's out and who's a little obnoxious, saying the opposite thing, just to kind of for those people like Mark, like you, who need that little push over the edge to get in there. Like let's do it, man, because there's no time to waste. And I know some people have taken haircuts on their prices. I think that's going to be short lived. And the approach is you're greedy when others are fearful. You keep buying, you plug your nose, and you do it. And I think people who invest in high quality subnets over time in size are going to be very, very happy they did, a year from now, certainly.
Totally agree. All right. Well, on that note, this has been Hash Rate. My name is Mark Jeffrey. We'll see you all next time.